Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is Thursday, the 27th of April 2017. And I was talking to you the other day, wasn't I, about how to destroy a country. A country you split up its essence. Like, for example, you put a white light through a prism and you break it up. Split up a country, you split up its essence. And of course, the essence of common law countries is the Christian spirit, I suppose you could say. Christianity, that's the essence of it. That's right at the core, the spirit of Christianity. Because from that comes the common law, from that comes the Constitution, from that comes the freedoms, the unusual freedoms that the common law countries have of the people, if they choose to apply the common law, that is, and don't select the corporate way. So, what I said was, if you want to destroy a country, you split it up at its essence. You go there, break it up. You get people who aren't of the Christian faith in positions of office, for example. That was split it up because, of course, that spirit can't be put into effect, can't be applied truly, unless you have those who are truly in accord with the spirit of the country running it. I found this quote. It's from Mark 3:24. And if a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom is not able to stand. And of course, if you've got a multicultural country, that's what happens. The country will not be able to stand. Now, I was thinking as well the other day about, actually yesterday as well, because people say, don't they? They say that, first of all, they say Christ is just a man. That's what he is. Just a man, like any other man. Others say he is God here in this world. I don't accept either of those. I don't think he's just a man, and I don't think he's God here in this world. I think both are right up to a point. Yes, he is a man, but there's something special. And yes, he is connected to God directly in a way that nobody else is, but he's also a man, you see. I was just thinking how you could demonstrate that, how you could give an analogy to that. And I thought of, those days when you have the grey sky, like a sheet of grey over, everything's grey, but the plants and trees and so on are still growing, and they're growing because of the ambient light. Now imagine if there's a bit of a split in the clouds, and down comes a beam of light. Sometimes you see those beams come through the clouds, like a beam. It goes down and it goes on one tree only. And that tree then is suddenly transformed, isn't it? It's directly connected to the direct source of the light. And it's photosynthesizing in a far more pure way. But it's still amongst the ambient light of the greyness, and it's still amongst the growing plants of this world. But it's a particularly special tree, isn't it? It's the one that's directly connected to the light from the sun. And of course, the light from the sun directly connected to the sun, to the core, to the source of all of that light. Whereas everything else isn't. And that is how, it's a good way of expressing how I see Jesus in this world. He's certainly here as a man, but he is uniquely, directly connected to God. And as I explain in the book, God Makes His Move, every stage we go through, as we go through the process of growth of knowledge, for example, a child goes from childhood to adolescence to young adulthood. They don't suddenly go into the next stage. They begin to show signs of it. It's as if the following stage reaches down and pulls them up to it. So adolescence pulls up the childhood. It reaches down into it. And the world has to be complete in the end, ultimately. And as it approaches the completion reaches down into the world, and it does that by connecting with Christ, who is basically the embodiment of all the growing consciousness of the creation. Like I said before, he's the big Russian doll. But he's the big Russian doll who's connected to the ultimate source. So that's how I like to see it. That's one of the ways I see it. He is a man, but he is the only one with a direct connection to God. No one else has that. It's a direct connection. So he is part God, part man. And I think that in some ways could satisfy those who say he's God as a man and those who say he's just a man. You know, it's sort of a middle ground. And what did Jesus say to that man when he was confronting the Pharisees? He said, rise up into the middle. And I think perhaps as far as that's concerned, we should be rising up into the middle in the recognition of who he is, who Christ is. He is the only man who has that complete connection. And this would explain, of course, that everything he did was in accord with his Father. You know, whatever I do is what the Father does. You know, it's directly in accord, but it also demonstrates how he can be here. Because don't forget, he prayed to his Father. Just as the tree that's bathed in sunlight, the only tree, is connected to the sun, the only one that's connected to the sun. The sun isn't here, but the sunlight is with the tree. You know, it's part of the photosynthesis of that particular tree. Anyway, I thought I'd share that with you. Maybe that would throw some light on your understanding of Christ the man. As it says, doesn't it? Christ the man. I think that's actually a quote. Can't remember where, but it is. I think it's in the Acts of the Apostles somewhere. Another inspiring thing about Christ, which I came across the other day, it was actually on television, which is extraordinary. But they do have to tell the truth sometimes because, of course, they hide things in plain view. And by telling the truth and surrounding it with lies, you make the truth appear insignificant. You trivialize it. But nevertheless, I saw a television program on the Turin Shroud, and it's just by accident. Just there it was, suddenly talking about Turin Shroud, and it was about the work of this Professor Fanti. I think that's how you pronounce his name. And you know, you must be like me, perhaps you've heard all the stories, haven't you, of the Turin Shroud being a fake and such like. And, you know, Middle Age is fake and so on and so on and so on. Well, this programme totally refuted that. And this Professor Fanti's work totally refutes all that stuff about the medieval fake. Goes into extraordinary detail, dating the actual shroud to between, I think it's 200 BC and 200 AD. You know, in the middle there. It could be anything in between there. And he also demonstrated how the marks on it came about, and it came about through an intensity of light, and which would fit, of course, with the resurrection, the moment of resurrection. You know, a life force came in there in an extraordinary way, and you can imagine it would be imprinted on the material surrounding the body. And he showed this, actually did an experiment on this and demonstrated it. Inspiring. I remember somebody saying, who was it? It was somebody I know, their son he just said to his mother, he said, when you die, you go, he's 2 at the time, he was actually 2, and he used to say these extraordinary things when he was 2. He said, when you die, it's like your forehead unzips and you go out of your forehead. He just said it out of the blue. And I know that when my granddad died, those around him, at the moment of his death, saw a luminescence around his head, around probably his forehead, I don't know, but it's certainly around it's around the upper half of his head at the moment he died. And we're talking about pretty sceptical people who saw that, and they did see it. The luminescence, the light sort of around the head. And when you look at the Turin Shroud and you look at the face in it, you can see this intensity just above the head. And I think that would be quite fitting as well, wouldn't it, if you consider what I've just said about the forehead. You know, it's that place of connection, isn't it? You know, they say we have these chakras on the top. Well, you can feel them sometimes, can't you? You can feel them energized, you know, on the top of your head, on the forehead, in your throat, and so on. And of course, the most spiritual one is on the top, isn't it? And so you can see that in the shroud. You know, the mark, the light above the head on the Turin Shroud. Anyway, as far as I was concerned, after watching this, I was absolutely thrilled by it. It was extremely inspiring, and it's beyond all reasonable doubt to me now that Turin Shroud is real and gives a true image, because I don't think that many people who were wrapped up in a shroud around about that time, who'd been crucified, who looked like a man, would have had these sort of burn marks, these extraordinary burn marks and imprints on the actual shroud. So that was extraordinary. And I noticed the other day somebody made a comment on one of the videos, and they said, if Israel is the chosen people, you know, the true Israel, and by that I explained that the tribes of Israel were, you know, linked in with the Saxons, you know, the Isaac's sons, tribe of, you know, the Danes connected to the tribe of Dan, etc., the Celts, for example, and the Welsh-speaking, almost very similar to Hebrew, because that's where they all ended up. They came together in the British Isles, which spread across the world into these common law countries. Do you remember I talked about that? And so I sort of said what I said. Actually, I think that's Israel, and I think that's the target. And that's what I believe, you know, Kissinger's talking about when Israel will be destroyed in 10 years, which he said in 2012. And somebody made a comment saying, well, if this is Israel and it's God's land, then why is it so horrible here? Well, one response to that is that if you have a child, do you stay with it all the time, every moment of its life? Do you protect it from falling in love and getting its heart broken? Do you protect it from going up a climbing frame, falling on the ground, and banging its leg or something? Do you protect it from the fights he might have with other boys in the playground or something? No, you've got to let them live their life. You know, God isn't a minder. He wants us to live. And we have made some very bad choices. And if you look at the Bible, the reason why the Israelites went into slavery was because they got corrupted. And this is what's happening. People get corrupted. Yes, there are the corruptors, but there are also the corruptees, those who consent to it. That's why it's difficult. But don't forget, the parent, when it gets bad enough, will always intervene. They will always step in if it gets a little bit too much. You know, you see your child who's a little bit too broken-hearted in the love affair. You move in there and you talk to them about it. Or if you see your child getting attacked by a man or something, you would go and step in and protect them. You know, have a bit of intervention. I think that's the only way I can really explain that. But we do actually have to live our lives. We've got to come away from the womb of being mollycoddled and live it and make choices. That's the reason. But everything has collapsed, as we know. It's the essence of our countries has been separated and divided, and the true Christian essence, as far as it could be, has been broken to bits, and our countries have been weakened as a result. And there will be this divine intervention to counter this disaster, and so we will get this restoration in the end. So we've got a lot to look forward to, I think. And as I said many times before, we've got a lot to do, a lot to learn about anything from the law to history to the true political situation in the world and so on. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. There's a couple of thoughts for you. Positive thoughts. Yes, there is certainly the Son of God, Jesus Christ, who is directly connected to God, almost like an extension for God, but rooted down here in this world as a man. Of course, he's not here in this world at this moment, but he will be returning. after the 490-year aeon, after the 490-year kingdom of God, to begin the millennium. And by the way, the Aeonian books, there's a new edition coming out. It's on May the 1st. It's a hardback one with bigger type. It's well worth getting as part of your collection of Bibles so that you can read and look, compare one to the other and go to the original Greek and learn about the true writings that are at the core, at the root of the spirit of our common law countries and the freedoms that they have given us through the common law. Anyway, there you go. Thank you very much, and I shall speak to you soon.